We're at the very northernmost part of the Yorkshire Dales National Park, and this in Arkengarthdale Valley has a long history of lead mining and sheep farming. So I'm in the middle here of a few different sheep farms, family owned, and then also we're surrounded by larger shooting estates. So that's my house peeping out there in the through the glade of trees, and the land at Heggs extends up from a meadow at the bottom right up to the top of Fremington Edge, which is above the moorline. So quite an interesting range to play with. You can see all the tree planting I've been doing over the last 6 years. So there's two big schemes. One was Woodland Trust funded and one was the White Rose Forest. And we've put in about 35,000 trees in total and hedgerows.
Gosh.
And that extends from quite dense woodland to very sparse wood pasture planting.
So Liz, tell us why you and some of the neighbouring properties here are involved in the Natural Environment Investment Readiness Fund.
Yeah, well, I've been keenly kind of following developments in, I guess, the nature-friendly farming arena for the time that I've had Heggs, and knowing about things like biodiversity net gain coming online, and being aware of things like carbon credits, and just wanting to get a better understanding of how we could really play a part in that, or indeed whether we were kind of too small fry as very small size farms in the uplands. So it was a great opportunity to work with a consultant to help us just get some real clarity on our situation and whether there are any other opportunities that we could be involved in.
And when you mention these markets there, where might the money come from?
As I mentioned, our position in the national park, and we're not very, very close to huge metropolises, that the things that are kind of more developed, like biodiversity net gain, are possibly not going to be our go-to. Also the scale, you know, we're all small size farms, so yes, bundling together in a cluster, that could make us a kind of attractive package, but you've got all the kind of legal costs and stuff surrounding that and the delay in being ready. And I think things like the voluntary markets which are emerging, especially if those require businesses to already be doing a robust set of kind of environmental in-house policies and being the best kind of corporate entity they can, I think being matched with those kind of people, for me, sits better ethically. The other markets we've looked at, like the carbon markets, that all works for kind of new planting, but for those who already have trees in the ground, there's a bit of a mismatch. Amongst our cluster, we're kind of the full spectrum. Me, who's not a farmer, who's a conservationist, a land manager who's trying to do nature restoration but isn't focused on food production. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you have got traditional beef and lamb farmers who are running several hundred stock, and are, you know, that's their whole bread and butter, as it were. And then you've got people in the middle who've been doing low input, nature friendly farming, you know, so still making a living from farming, but also having nature very much at the forefront of their thinking and practices for several decades. So they're already at a place where their land's pretty good ecologically. So how can they tap into these emerging markets?
So Liz, tell us what stage you're at now with this NEIRF supported work.
Well, we're right at the midpoint, so we have contracted all of the work to Agri Natural Capital, who's doing all the scoping for us and the subcontracting the ecological surveys. So we've all had our remote surveys done by using the Land app technology. We've had some on-site visits by an ecologist to do a kind of UK Habs 4 understanding of the landscape. And then we've had in-depth conversations between the consultant and each farmer to understand the nature of the business, how they use the land, if there are any bits of the land that are kind of redundant or less productive, interpret the mapping that we've been doing, what are their aspirations are for their farm businesses, what they would like to change if they could, and then kind of put all that together to see what the opportunities are in terms of environmental uplift in some of the parcels.
So now you've got this baseline, as and when there is uplift in the biodiversity value or the carbon value of land here, you can sell against that.
We've got a record of where we are now, so any works that are done, at least we've got evidence to say that it's gone from, X to Y. Being in the national park, biodiversity net gain, there's not really many opportunities.
There isn't the built development
there's not
happening.
There's not development scale, and as independent, small, medium-sized farms, the kind of land we have to creditise is minimal, and also we found we don't necessarily have the right habitat types. So what is selling at the minute is not what we have. As a small upland farm, you're working with a very small annual turnover and finances that go year to year, so you're unlikely to have £20,000 that you can gamble on something with no guarantee of when or if it'll be repaid. So it's just a very different scenario, I think, to other farms elsewhere in the country of different sizes or of larger sizes. The other markets that are kind of more robust, like your carbon credits and stuff, that's a bit more of a straightforward thing. But again, the density of the woodland is possibly not necessarily what our landscape wants to support. And what I'm hoping that's going to happen at some point is a kind of central regulated body or brokerage where you can see what's there and you can upload your land parcel and say, somebody wants the NFM credits, somebody wants the carbon credits, somebody wants the peatland credits, somebody wants the biodiversity credits, and it's just a much more kind of automated and transparent system.
There is a scheme in York that's looking to reduce flood risk. Tell us a bit more about that and how this land could play a part.
Yeah, so there's a new scheme called USWEM, which is being funded by the City of York, in part, if not whole. They have about £2 million to spend in Arkengarthdale primarily to look at ways to mitigate the flooding which York experiences on quite a regular basis. And how land along the valley bottom in particular, and then seasonal gills and such, could be repurposed as kind of natural flood management works. So we've already started looking at possible locations for scrapes, leaky dams, localised planting and that kind of stuff, just all with the mind to ease the flow.
So Liz, in a valley like this, there are some, like yourself, who own the property here, but there are others on tenancy agreements as well. How does it work with that mix of owners and tenants participating together in environmental markets?
Yeah, well, that's where we found some hurdles, because a lot of the land's owned by very large estates who then tenant off the land to various farmers. And so even though the farmer might want to do things differently with some of his land parcel, the decision is actually with the landowner. So you can work up all these, great schemes, but actually if it doesn't get the final sign-off, and then if it's a long-term tenancy, for example, some of the tenancies can be passed down to the next generation. There's a big question mark on then who then gets the dividends from these nature market payments. If you sign a scheme that's for 30 years and you're expecting to sell units over 30 years, what happens if that tenancy runs out during that time? And I'm just hugely grateful that NEIRF exists and that we've been able to be a part of it. It's given us a far greater understanding of, our own context and how we might fit, and we just wouldn't have had the means to, understand that without the funding.